So, nice that so many people could wanted to join in. It's awesome. This will be a pure introductory course for Unreal Engine. If you worked with the engine before, some parts might be quite basic, and even if you worked with another game engine before, especially for this first session, things might be quite simple. We have all manner of people taking part, so we sort of need to work away from someone who's never used a game engine before. Um, so everyone feels comfortable working in the engine. But please, even if it feels a bit basic, we'll get into a little more advanced stuff along the way. But we'll take it step by step. So, a little short presentation before we get started. We'll get the boring stuff out of the way first, and so we can get going with the fun stuff of creating awesome stuff in Unreal and learning Unreal. My name is Stefan Eriksson. I run a company called Goat Mountain Development. I started this company this summer, actually, so I'm pretty new. But I've been working with Unreal since 2015 for hobby projects and stuff like that. So I've been doing quite a bit of work in Unreal. Spent way too much time in it. I do consultancy, programming, C++ and C#, help support, technical support, stuff regarding Unreal Engine, and training like we're doing right now. And I also do my own plugins, which I sell on the Epic Marketplace, which is just a sort of an asset store for connected to the Unreal Engine. So, what is Unreal Engine? It's used for a lot of stuff, but it was initially developed as a game engine, and it still is primarily a game engine. And we sort of have to keep that in mind, but I'll get back to that later on. Today it's used for, well, everything, sort of everything visual, more or less. Still used for both AAA and indie games, of course. That's probably the biggest use case still. But it's also used for virtual production, for movies and TV, live broadcasts, visualizations for products and reviews, used in review processes, and it's quite big in architecture visualization as well. So it can be used both as a pure game engine and a real-time renderer, pretty much. So the sort of benefits and the implementation of Unreal, and why it's sort of good to use and good to know. It sort of offers a layered approach to what's traditionally the code base in a game engine, or in a program. So we have both a C++ core, which is sort of the low-level implementation, and then we have on top of that using C++ sort of as a scripting language, where we have a memory managed version of C++ that's also reflected to the editor. So we sort of have reflection with C++, which is quite uncommon. And then on top, and what we'll be working with in this course is Blueprint, which is a visual scripting language that's in the editor. It's quite powerful, and we can get really, really far just using that. So we don't actually need to know coding. We need to know the principles of coding, and we need to know sort of how coding works, but we don't need to know the syntax. We can sort of just drag lines between nodes instead. So it's a node-based visual scripting language. But it also has a very robust and fast visual pipeline. That's probably why it's its strongest selling point and why it's become so popular. And also a very high performant and powerful audio engine. So, like I said, Blueprints, one of the main benefits, it offers really fast iteration times on prototyping. We can just make few changes. We don't need to recompile code and stuff like that. So prototyping stuff in Unreal is really fast. So we can work in a very iterative process and make stuff, get stuff working before we sort of implement it properly. And then it's the whole engine is built with a mindset to be artist friendly. So the coders like me as a programmer, we sort of know our tools. We're digging deep in the code, and we're sort of comfortable with that. But to get artists in and working in a game engine, we want to use similar approaches as they might use in a 3D program or a whatever kind of program they're used to working with. So it's the whole engine is sort of built with that in mind. So the step in shouldn't be too big. And it also offers quite extensive out-of-the-box functionality. So like I mentioned, it's used for a lot of industries, and the whole engine is modular. So we can sort of enable and disable functionality, and it all comes sort of out of the box. And it also helps us with prototyping and getting stuff up and running pretty fast. And then we have a whole list of sort of useful features like multi-user editing, where it can sort of be a lot of creators in the engine at the same time. So the whole engine is sort of like a multiplayer game. So we can have several people working in the same instance and see changes live in the engine. So that's really good for teams and extensively used in virtual production and stuff like that. Built-in source control, support for media formats, pipeline integration with the content creation programs and other stuff like that. A very robust landscape and foliage system, simulations for cloth and hair, and destruction. And for gaming, it has a really robust game framework that's built to be both extendable and built with sort of a multiplayer framework in mind, so it's easy to get multiplayer up and running. And also has a very extensive platform support, even if it's best known for sort of high-end platforms that's like PC and consoles more than mobile. So it's about time to get into the engine and start working there, but we sort of have to know what to expect as well before we do that. And first of all, we have to sort of realize that we're working in a game engine. So we'll be making sort of a game today. Well, during this course, more to say, because whatever we're going to use the engine for, we have to know sort of the constraints and the framework set for a game, because we'll be working with those tools. So we sort of have to conform to level design and stuff like object lifetimes that are set by follows sort of a game engine framework, and also have to know about frame updates and optimizations that come into play when we're working with a game engine. So we can't use all 4K textures for everything and have incredibly high detailed meshes all over, because we're trying to do this in real time, for example. And we'll learn how to work around that and how to optimize as well. So the best way to learn all this is by making a game, and we'll get started on that. Let's see. But for this to make any sort of sense, I'll walk you through this sort of structure of the course. So for day one today, we'll be getting up and running. We'll be creating our first project. We'll be having a walkthrough of the Unreal interface, and you'll get to play around with that. I'll be showing you around, and then I'll give you some time to play around yourselves. So this will be more of a workshop than just me talking and you listening. So I want you to play around in the editor, because that's the only way to learn how to use it. We have to get comfortable with a few hotkeys and stuff, where to find stuff and stuff like things like that. So we'll be creating a project, walking through the interface. I'll be showing you around, and then you can sort of click around and find your way about. And then we'll be starting to build our own world, and placing stuff in the editor, and just doing sort of level design, and learning the tools of the trade there for at least an initial sketch of a level. Then we're getting more into setting materials and making something pretty, more or less, but it won't be all that pretty today probably. But we'll be walking through the material graph and how the material workflow is set up in Unreal. And that also comes with working with external assets. We'll be doing some importing of some assets and stuff like that. So we know how to work with external assets. And depending on the time, I might get into a little bit of Blueprint, and also we might get into working, setting up how to work with the Quixel as well, so we can sort of use that to build up our level. I'll be sort of giving you an optional voluntary assignment after the end of the course, so that you can work on during the week before the next session. So we sort of need to know these steps, and you can just sort of build out your world during the coming week. Then for course day 2, hopefully, we'll be starting doing Blueprint and a bit of logic in Blueprint and creating our own actors. we'll be building some dynamics into the level with the moving stuff around and stuff like that. And also we'll do a bit of an introduction to sequencer and camera work, which is sequencer is the built-in system for cinematics and moving stuff with timelines and stuff and things like that, because so we can create sort of a dynamic feel for our scene. And then day 3, it's all about input and player controls, and then we'll do a lot more blueprint stuff, because in the end we can only get so far with just placing stuff in a world. We sort of need our logic, even if we're doing it purely for using the engine purely for the visuals. We still need to know blueprints so we can create some sort of dynamics in our visual scene. Right. I set up a little link with the longest domain name ever, my company domain name, and on that it's UE4 intro. So goatmountaindevelopment.com, UE4 intro. There you can find the project I prepared before. So if you happen to miss this lecture, for example, yeah, I can post that in chat. Oh. There'll be a project there as well, but that project will sort of be the completed project of what we'll be doing today, more or less. So if you happen to miss this course, or you just want to catch up for the next course, you can download that project. There's also a link, so you can download that project from Git if you rather do that. And as well, there's a few assets. There's an FBX and a few textures that the textures I shamelessly stole from Quixel, but don't tell anyone. We're allowed to use them because we're working in Unreal, so it's fine. And there's also an FBX that we're not gonna look too closely at because I made it. And there's also this PowerPoint. So if you need any of that, it's available there. So I think we should get started. Yeah. I'm gonna exit this. And I'll try to take breaks to answer questions. I have Eddie here next to me as well, from Flattail. He's been working quite a bit in Unreal as well. But he for some reason he said he wanted to come here and learn the basics. I don't know why. But it's nice to have him here, and he'll if you have questions or need clarification on something, type a question in the chat and he'll try to answer it. And if not, I'll pick it up and answer it. But since there's quite a lot of us, there's 48 of us now, try to either wait with your questions until I notify you that, well, we'll take a few questions now, or just type them in the chat and we'll try to get to them. So everyone isn't talking at the same time. So we'll get some sort of structure for this. But if there's something that's really unclear, just get my attention and we'll walk through it. So hopefully everyone has 4.25 installed and the Epic launcher. So we'll get started there. And since there's about 20 people joined since I said it the last time, if you haven't installed engine version 4.25 or the Epic launcher at all, Google installing Unreal Engine and you'll arrive at this documentation page. It'll tell you how to create an Epic account, download Epic launcher, how to log in and find Unreal Engine, installing the engine version, a correct engine version, and then we'll get going from there. So I am now. I hope you can see my mouse. I really should have had a mouse pointer highlighter. It's fine. Left-hand side, Unreal Engine. And then we have our top menu. We have our Unreal Engine, which is just sort of a news stuff about the Unreal Engine. We have a learning tab, marketplace, where you can go buy my awesome plugins. Library, where we have all our stuff. Then Twinmotion, which is used for architecture visualization mostly. It's sort of a fork of the engine with the extra tools. But we'll go to library. So we have our engine versions and we'll have a look here first. So we have our engine versions at the top. We have our projects that we've created before, below under my projects. Then we have a vault with all our plugins, and I have quite a few of them. Way too many to know. They're giving away like 4 or 5 plugins every month for free. So you sort of have to grab them while they're free, even if you're never going to use them, and it sort of fills up quite fast. I'm not sure. The question was, is there a way to remove plugins from the vault? I'm not sure. I've never tried. Maybe. I don't know why you would want to remove one, but maybe if you have too many like me. But we'll launch the engine to get started. So engine versions 4.25, and the button is launch, and we'll do that. And it'll load a while. If you're launching a project for the first time, well, I'll get back to that actually. Yeah, you're supposed to sort of follow my moves and tag along. You don't have to follow them precisely, but I'll take it step by step, and you can follow along. So we're back. We started up the engine, and we get our recent projects. It's the same as my projects here, sort of thing, but it's a shorter list of the ones I've recently had open. And then we have project categories. It doesn't really matter what category we select. The only difference is that some plugins or modules are enabled and disabled, and there's template projects that are focused on different areas. So we're gonna use a game project today, but we can sort of have a look at the other ones. So for film and television, for example, if we click next, we have a blank project with a few plugins enabled. We have a virtual production template and displays for using multiple displays, like a LED wall or something like that. And then we have architecture, engineering, and construction. We have an ArchViz template, which is used for architecture visualization. If you're going to visualize a house, for example. We have a HoloLens viewer, so you can set up for using HoloLens and viewing a product, and a collab viewer, which is actually a multiplayer collaboration, viewing a model of something in a multiplayer environment. So you can have many collaborators looking at the same product at the same time, so you can sort of review something together. Automotive, product design and manufacturing. We have a photo studio for cars or whatever, with the lighting setup and all that stuff. We have the HoloLens viewer again. We have a project configurator, which you can sort of make an interactive product configurator that might be web-based or something like that, or offered to clients on an iPad or something. And we have the collab viewer again. But we'll be using a games project today. So back to the games category and go next. And there we have a whole bunch of different templates. So you just can sort of see that it's a game engine for foremost a game engine. So we have a first person template, we have a flying saucer template, a puzzle template, rolling ball template for a physics game, a third person, which is the one we'll be using. We have a top-down template, so you sort of get these templates which you can sort of get up and running pretty quick if you want to make a specific type of game. So twin stick shooters, AR, side scrollers, vehicles, and virtual reality and advanced vehicle, which is a bit more advanced vehicle setup with dampening and stuff like that. Blank projects basically just create, doesn't come with any sort of assets or anything, so it's just pretty much a blank project with a cube in a default level. Doesn't contain anything. But we'll be using a third person project, so we can sort of run around in our level with a character. For the second and third session, we'll be doing alterations to this character and making it sort of our own. But for now, we'll be using the default one. So select third person, click next, and at the very top left here, we have the project type. We have blueprint projects and C++ projects. So we can use the editor without having any of our own C++ code, and that's what we'll be doing now. It creates a bit more lightweight project, and also we can always convert it into a C++ project later on, where we can add our own C++ classes and stuff. We can't really move from the other way to blueprint only. So if we select a C++ project, we'll be getting all the implementation in C++, and we can't revert that back to a blueprint, but we can move from blueprint to C++. So we'll be selecting a blueprint project. Quality settings, ray tracing. If we at least here at campus, we have quite beefy computers, so we could do ray tracing, but let's not, because it'll be slower, and especially setting the project up will take a little bit of time. The target platform, we'll be doing a desktop and console. We can choose mobile and tablet. And then starter content, we'll add some starter content because we want meshes and stuff to work with. So select with starter content. And if we miss that, we can always add them later, but try to get them in from the start. At the bottom, the path for where we want to keep our project. We bumped into an issue yesterday. If you have Swedish characters in the search path, it'll work fine for a Blueprint project, but it won't work for a C++ project. So try to avoid having Swedish characters in your path name. And then we have the name of our project. So I'll call mine Unreal Introduction. So that'll be the name of my project. And then just do create project and it'll launch. Now, like I said, if you're doing this for the very first time, the engine might take a little time to load in the project. It might seem to get stuck on like 30% or 40% and be stuck there for minutes. And you're thinking, well, this isn't working. But what it's doing in the background is actually a bunch of shader compilations and stuff like that. And it will eventually kick off, but it might take up to 4 or 5 minutes before it actually moves from one percentage to another. And then it'll sort of just roll on and open up the project. Right. So we'll do a little break for questions. I don't know if there's all that many by now, but I need to take a breath and rest my voice for just a few seconds. So if you have any questions, we'll take them now. Otherwise, we'll get started. Yeah, it's so the question is it possible to convert Blueprint to C++ code? The best way to do it would actually be to convert manually, so to speak. You make your prototype in Blueprint, and then you sort of copy the functionality over and write it in C++. No, 4.25 or from 24, we're using version 4.25. So yeah, converting from Blueprint to C++. There is an option called nativize Blueprint, which will actually create, well, the engine itself will try to create C++ code from Blueprint code. That works kind of. You might not work in all instances depending on the Blueprint code, and even if when it does work, it might not actually produce the best code, but it's sort of a step in performance, so you can sort of incrementally take it up in performance. What you can do also is sort of expose parts and override functionality from a C++ class in Blueprint. So that's usually the way to do it. So you sort of mark a function or something in C++ as being overridden, being able to be overridden in Blueprint, and then you sort of just make the function in C++, implemented in Blueprint for testing and prototyping, and then you take that and type and implement it in C++ once you've found the best way to do it. So how large a game project would be in megabytes? So the largest part is of course the assets. So it's mostly dependent on the assets you have you're using. What takes up most of the room is textures, FBXs, sounds, stuff like that. So that's pretty much what's gonna set the size of your project. The default project, I think, is like maybe 400 megabytes or something when you don't have all that much in it. I'm not sure, might even be smaller. It's larger than a Unity project, I know that, but It's the bulk of the size will always come from your choice of assets. So if you, when making a blueprint UE project, to rely on blueprints or hard coding, yeah, that sounds about it. 660 megabyte with starter content. So starter content takes up quite a bit of room. So maybe it's only 300 megabytes for the default project. Right. So blueprint or hard coding. Well, C++ isn't really, and the C++ used in Unreal isn't really hard coding either. It's just exposing stuff to the editor, and you mostly edit stuff in the editor anyway, depending on what you're doing. But it all comes down to performance. Blueprint isn't as fast as C++. So what you kind of want to do is do all the heavy lifting in C++. You want to avoid doing stuff like casting to Blueprint classes and doing a lot of tick functionality in Blueprint, but high level implementation, like changing colors dynamically at runtime, or changing properties, or stuff like that, stuff that might not happen that often, might not you're not creating anything new, not instantiating anything, you're not casting to Blueprint class and other Blueprint classes, then Blueprint is totally fine. It's really fast. Anyway, it's slightly slower than C#, but slower than C++, definitely. So it's sort of a, you have to weigh your options depending on how many programmers you have and stuff like that. So you sort of want your programmers to do the low level heavy implementations, and then let your designers do stuff in Blueprint, more or less. That's sort of the preferred way to work. Right. So our first project. Welcome to the Unreal Editor. So we'll walk through the interface. This is sort of we have our, in the middle here we have our default map for this template loaded. It says third person in the middle there because this is a third person template map. And we have a bunch of stuff there, but we'll start here on the left. So we have a place actor palette, more or less, with a bunch of categories on the left, and under that category a bunch of stuff. So we have stuff like, well, in this basic category we have empty actors. We can place a cube, a sphere, a cylinder, a cone, and stuff like that. And it, to place something from this actor palette is easy as clicking it and dragging and dropping it into the level. So we can just drag stuff into the level, and then we have a cube. So we can select a light, for example, under the light category. We want a point light. We can just drag that in as well. So now we have a cube and a light. Under cinematic, we have a bunch of cameras and stuff. We have some visual effects, which is a large part in getting stuff to look nice. We need like post-process effects, and we need fogs and stuff like that to get everything looking the way we want it. Under geometry, we have quite an interesting thing that we might be probably be using a bit today. So the cube I placed here is actually an FBX and a model that's been imported into the engine from an outside source, outside content creation program. So I can't really do much to this other than like scaling it, and I'll show how to scale in a bit, but and rotate it and move it about and stuff like that. Under the geometry tab, we have what's called a BSP brush. Yeah, I'm gonna tell you how to move around in just a little bit. Eddie asked if everyone knew how to move about. I'll show you when I get to the viewport. So if I place a box from this geometry tab, it ends up here. And I can actually, oh, sorry. I'm losing my place. There we go. I can actually, sorry. These are editable. So we can sort of build shapes from them and alter the size in and still get sort of a proper layout. And we can even sort of do a half-assed modeling using them. And these are used for just prototyping up a level, just building up a level before we have any proper assets to use. These aren't as efficient to use as an imported FBX, for example. So try to use them only for prototyping and sort of gray boxing your level, building up shapes and seeing what works. And then we replace them with our imported meshes. But I'll show you in a little bit how to alter that one, because I want to move over to that side of the editor in just a bit. Volumes, a bunch of types of volumes that we might want to use. It's for lighting and navigation and all sort of stuff. And then we have sort of a complete list of a whole bunch of stuff. But we won't be touching that much today, but we can sort of find all manner of things. At the top, we have menu. We have save current, save stuff, and we have an editor mode. We'll be touching that in a little bit. We have content settings and settings for the project, and I have a Megascans plugin enabled. That's available up here. We have blueprints menu that's hardly ever used apart from the level blueprint. A cinematics menu, blah, blah, blah. Build menu, we'll be using that a little bit. As you can see in the top left corner here of my big window, it says lighting needs to rebuild. I'll talk about that a bit later, but we'll be using that build menu to fix that. We have a play button, and we can just try to press that, and we end up playing sort of the game. And it's played like most games these days with the WASD, and you can turn the mouse to look around, and we can just run around in a level. So when we want to try our level out, press the play button. Escape to exit. Launch is sort of like the play button, but we launch it in a standalone window, and it actually launches sort of the game. So it's same thing, but it takes a little bit longer. So in the middle, our viewport, and we're viewing the level. And since this is a game engine, moving about in the viewport is sort of the same as a first-person game. When we hold down second mouse button, we can press WASD. So hold down second mouse button, WASD. We can move about, turn the camera as well. So we can sort of navigate around this way, fly about in the level. Left click to select something, easy enough. We get a gizmo here that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. Well, we can do that now. Moving stuff around in the level when we're designing. As you can see now, we have a translation gizmo. So we just drag in by the arrows and we move stuff about. That's the default gizmo, so moving. Up in the top left corner, we have sort of view modes. So we can select, for example, a top-down view mode. Then we get a wireframe view of our top of our level. Bottom left, much like a 3D any 3D design program. Perspective is the default. Next to that, we have some sort of optimization view modes and stuffs that can sort of help us out. We have the default lit view mode, so we can see all the lighting. We can see the whole scene without lighting. And then next to that, we have sort of a filter for what we want to view, so we can filter stuff out. We won't be touching that much, but it's a good thing to know that it's there. On the right-hand side, the default gizmo, like I said, is the move gizmo. So we have that selected. It's the orange one here. We can go to rotate. So again, we can sort of rotate stuff around its pivot point. And we can scale stuff up and down. So we can scale stuff up and down. Scaling and stuff is like I did now. I scaled all 3 axes simultaneously and just sort of scaled everything. You can scale it in a single axis as well, whichever one you want to scale it in. Sort of works the same for all the gizmos. So you can rotate in all 3 axes simultaneously, or you can move stuff in all 3 axes simultaneously as well. Next to that, we have cycles to transform gizmo coordinate system between world and local. So if we have a look down in the bottom left corner, we sort of have the Unreal coordinate system. The Unreal coordinate system is X is forward. We count X as forward. Y is right. So the green arrow Y is right. The red arrow is forward. X is forward. Z is up. So if you were used to working in a Y up program, here we use Z as up. So we can sort of shift between our world coordinate system, where X will always be forward, to having a local coordinate system that's set by the asset, the mesh. So now, when I rotated it, it's X it's forward for the mesh and not for the world coordinate system. Quite handy. We have a few snapping options. Snapping, rotation snapping. Oh, surface snapping. We have a grid snapping, which is what's on by default. So when I move this, now I'm actually moving it in 10 centimeter incrementations, because it says 10 here. Unreal is using a centimeter based coordinate system, so every 1 unit is 1 centimeter. We can alter that, change it to a bunch of different 1 meter, 10 centimeters, 10 meters, and so on. So we can set our grid snapping distance. Same thing for rotations. We can set our snapping distance, so for every rotation we make, it makes a 5-degree rotation or 10-degree rotation. Scale snapping, same thing. We can set our scale. And at the far right, we have camera speed. So if we're moving about the level and we think, well, this is going way too fast or way too slow, we can alter the camera speed, and now it's way slower. before we move further, hotkeys, the primarily hotkeys for translation, rotation, and scale is W, E, and R. So W is for translation, E is for rotation, and R is for scale. So you can sort of just change between the gizmos really fast. So you can sort of get fast without having to go up and move stuff about. Right side, world outliner, everything that's in this current level. If you're used to working with Unity, there we have sort of the outliner in Unity sort of means something for the hierarchy of structures or game objects. It doesn't as much in Unreal. It's more just a hierarchy of an organizational hierarchy, so we can sort of keep track of our level. The object hierarchy for components and the game objects actors in Unreal is set elsewhere, not here. So don't you can attach stuff to other things, but it doesn't really work the same as Unity. But it's more just an organizational with the folders and stuff like that to keep things tidy. Below that, we're getting to the altering cubes part now. We have our details panel, which is where we can alter the information or parameters of stuff we have selected. So if I select my cube here again, oh yeah, so details panel, right? I got distracted by the chat. So this is a BSP brush, our cube here. We added it from the geometry tab. It has a bunch of options. We won't care about the surface property for now. We'll just have a look at these brush settings. So here we have sort of a size of our brush. So we can alter it and build a cube that's totally different, and it still be, the UVs will be correct and stuff like that. So for building up and prototyping and gray boxing a level, this is quite handy. We can use this one if we want a wall, for example. We'll say it's going to be, oh, that's 4,400, 4 meters high, and we want it 40 meters wide, and a wall should only be like 20 centimeters thick. So now we sort of have a wall. We can move about. And my grid snapping is set too high right now. But if we set it to 10, we can move it in 10 centimeter increments, place it on the floor, and place stuff. And that sort of works with all these geometry meshes. So we're going to use those to sort of build out our level. We can also use these basic cube shapes, of course. But in the details panel, we can find all manner of settings to set for everything in the level. For now, we won't go too much into detail there because it's a whole bunch of stuff. But we can have a look at this as well. When I have my cube selected here in the level, this has some material. It defines the color and stuff of this cube. So at the bottom here, we have our content browser. and I'll say it now before I forget. Eddie wanted me to tell you that you can open multiple content browsers if you feel the need for that. I don't really use multiple content browsers, but he does. So he thought that'd be a good tip. Right now, we're seeing a folder called Blueprints, a folder called Maps. In our Maps folder, we have a third-person example map, and that's the map we're in right now. So if I just double-click that, it'll say, hey, what do you want to save the changes made to this? And I said, don't save them. And we open up this map again. And we have it from like we had it at the very start. As you can see now, I'm in that folder and I don't really know the structure of the project. So if you click the top left icon under Add New, you can get a tree structure as well. So you can sort of see the whole structure of the project and expand and contract folders there. So it's pretty much a file browser. It isn't much more complicated than that. If you know how to use a file browser, you know how to use this one. So we can have a look in our starter content, for example. This is the stuff we got when we added the started content. Is there someone not in this? All right. So starter content, all the stuff we got with our starter content. So if you go to architecture, for example, we got a bunch of walls of different shapes, walls with doors and stuff like that. We can always double click any of these assets and we can open up and have a little view of our wall here. These are also can be used for, we can use this in our prototyping as well. So any of these, just from the content browser, mark them, drag them into the level, place them. So we can use those to build up stuff. Bunch of audio files. I think we can just pull those in as well. Yeah, pull them in. I'll play the audio. Blueprints. We have a ceiling lights that's set up as a blueprint and stuff like that. So, but we'll get more into that later. But you can always drag those in as well. So we have a ceiling light. Very nice. HDRI backdrops, some few example levels, we can always open those as well. A whole bunch of materials that's been set up, so we can use those. To simply set a material on something we placed in the level, we can just drag that material onto the cube, for example, and then the cube is sort of a crappy clay brick because the UVs won't match, but we still have crappy clay brick and not gray. A few particle systems, can drag those in as well, place a particle. So it's everything is pretty much drag and drop. Props, really nice, place a share in the level, might be useful. Shapes, a few basic shapes we can use as well for prototyping and building stuff up. Textures used by the materials and stuff like that. So feel free to use those as well when we're building up sort of our scene. Right, so I thought we'd take about 10 minutes, place stuff in your level, remove stuff. We can always just mark something, press delete, scale stuff, move stuff about, start building up something interesting. And I'll take a few questions as well. And I'll try to answer those as well. So Petra had a question. So the box brush objects, if I use scale gizmo, the UVs will be distorted. And if I scale numerically, the brush panel UVs will adapt to the model relationship. Or is there a combo key? No. That's sort of a shortcoming of the BSP brushes. You have to scale them numerically in the details panel to get the UVs correct. You can alter the UVs by scaling them in the details panel as well, but I mean that's kind of tedious to get right anyway. So it's way better just to sort of use the tools there. I am going to show, however, there is actually an editor mode. So if you go to modes and we go to brush editing, so if I pull a new cube out, we can go to modes, brush editing, and then we sort of get a brush edit set mode. And then we can just mark this face, drag it out, and then the UVs will be correct. So that's a way better, way faster way to work. So then we can just drag and drop. So that's way faster. So to find that, go to modes, brush editing, but then we sort of have to move back to select later on. So I'll move back to select and I get back to the default. So if you want to add starter content, if you missed adding starter content at the start, we can click this green add new button in the content browser. And at the very top, we had add feature or content pack. So for example, if you started the project as a blank project instead of a third-person project, I could add the whole third-person project to my project, and I get all the assets and the level and stuff like that as well. And then at the very right in the top, we have a mobile starter pack and a starter content. And we're using starter content, mobile starter content. I think it's pretty much the same, but it's simplified materials and might be lower poly count meshes. So I'll also bring up sort of the project I made as the inspiration for what we're gonna do today. You can of course create exactly what you feel like, whatever you want, but I'll open up the project. If you download the project from the files I posted earlier, the link I posted earlier, this is the project you'll get, and it's just a sort of gray boxed out level, which is sort of a ancient temple thingy, just created with the internal assets in the editor without adding any extra FBXs or anything like that. So it's just BSP brushes and cubes and primitive forms. So we pretty much have a landscape, and I'll hopefully have a little bit time to talk about landscapes as well. I see the clock is moving quite fast, but hopefully we'll have time for that as well. Just a whole little level here. That's sort of the inspiration. And I marked the blue stuff as something I thought about doing dynamically later on with a bridge that appears when we get close to it or something like that. So you can sort of just prototype your level out and then see if it works, try play testing it and stuff like that, see if, yeah, this seems fun. Then replace everything with your own models or models you've gotten from somewhere else. I can talk a bit while you're working. You don't have to follow along, but if you can listen one ear and keep working, I'll talk a little bit more about DSP brushes, since I guess we'll be using those a bit. I'm not a huge fan of them, but because they're a bit cumbersome to work with. By default, we get this default material on them. It's just a checkerbox default material. And if we look in the details panel again, under these brush settings, where I altered the size of the brush, there's also at the top a brush type, which can be either additive or subtractive. So if I add another box, I can sort of make them intersect. And then for that new box, I'll set a subtractive, and then we actually have a Boolean, so we can create shapes from Booleans as well. So it's quite handy for just creating quick shapes, and it's quite handy. While you're working and placing stuff in the level, you might notice it get quite tedious to just drag new stuff in all the times. Like if I want to place a cube, yeah, that's fine. So, okay, I want another cube. I have to drag from there. I want to make a whole row of cubes here, and this is going to get really tedious. To duplicate something in the scene, this is probably one of the most valuable hotkeys in the whole engine while working in the level designer at least. If you hold down the Alt key, I'm not sure, I think it's the Command key if you're using a Mac, and either whatever gizmo you have up, it might be rotation, scale, or transform. As long as you hold the Alt key and drag, it'll actually create a copy of it. So now I can just drag those out, and then I can just, let's say I want a whole row. I mark all 4, holding Shift and click, like any good program. Alt, drag, and then I get 4 new cubes. Place them next to each other. Easy enough. And I can, since I know that these cubes are 1 meter each, I can set the snapping as well to 100. I can Alt click and drag. Oh, sorry. Alt click and drag, and it actually snaps perfectly to the next one as well. So snapping is good for that as well. But Alt drag, Alt rotate, the Alt key is king when it comes to placing stuff in the level, because you'll be adding a lot of stuff. So if you're, I can sort of give you a spoiler of what I've been thinking about doing for dynamics, dynamically moving stuff about in the level for the next session. So you can sort of get that into your concept. I'm gonna make a moving platform, just a traditional 2D platform, a moving platform. What else? If you have any suggestions what we might make, you can always type them, and we can sort of get them into the concepts as well. But so if you're scaling out and during the week later on building this whole grand level, boxing it out and replacing meshes and stuff, you might want to make room for a moving platform somewhere in your level. So selecting several objects at once, either control click or shift click. Control click, it works as well. both Control and Shift works. So if you can also select stuff in the world outliner. There, if you use Shift click, it'll select everything between. So from cube to cube 7. And if I Control click, it'll select single select, so cube and cube 7. If you've lost your place in the level, if you, I've ended up somewhere way over here and I can't find my way back to the level, mark something. For example, now I have wall 7 marked, press F and it'll focus on that. And we're up and running again. You can also, let's see, yeah, there we go. And the very top right corner, you can get this for split screen. I'm used to working in 3D Max setup, or old-timey, what was that called? The level designer for Quake. You mean a heist map? Oh, come on. Maximize that viewport. And the settings for these brushes as well is a bit different. So now that I have a stair, I can actually set my stair length, my stair height, stair width, and so on, and number of steps. So if I want a higher stair, I can just add 20 steps instead of 10, stuff like that. So they all have a bit different settings, but they all pretty much work the same. Shortcut for the perspective view. Alt G. So admit. Yeah. So for when attaching stuff to other stuff, you could easily think that you just drag them onto each other. So now I have this in the world outliner. You can create a hierarchy by just dragging and dropping stuff on top of each other easily enough. But they're not actually attached yet. We can, however, do attach to. Let's see. Oh, instead they are attached to parent. Let's see then. Cube 2. Let's see. Maybe it is attached. Let's see if it is attached. Yeah, it is attached. I thought it wouldn't be. To be honest, I rarely use that. I usually just mark stuff and yeah, so easy enough. Drag and drop them on top of each other. They're attached. So if you start ending up with a lot of stuff in your level, so I have a bunch of cubes here, and I sort of want to organize them into a folder. Then at the very top right corner, I can create a new folder. Now I have all these folders marked, these items marked. They'll be automatically added to that folder. I'll call that cubes. So now we sort of just have an organization. So the folders are just for organization. So they're not a parent object as such. So that's sort of a difference if you're used to working with Unity, for example. The cube is just an organizational thing. It doesn't have a transform, so you can't mark the cubes folder and select drag or translate it. You actually have to mark like all the contents of that folder and drag and move the stuff about. My stairs don't. So I got a question how I made more steps. Make sure you don't have the linear stair static mesh selected because that's a static mesh. It's an FBX. We can't make alterations to it. But if you go to geometry, linear stairs, drag that out, then under brush settings in the details panel, we have number of steps. We can make 20. Yes. So imported FBXs are static, unless you have a really cool tool made in Houdini or something. But that's for a totally different course where you can procedurally make a bunch of stairs from an asset. We can, however, convert these BSP brushes to FBXs, but rarely do. So I hope you've placed a bunch of stuff and haven't just been listening to me ramble on. We'll talk a little bit. I'll actually go back to the boring slides again, and we'll talk a little bit about the Unreal framework, how it's sort of structured, and what we've actually been doing now that we've been placing stuff in our level. So I'll drag this over again. And go to the next slide. So the level we would have visible in our viewport now, that third person level is actually what's called a U level, but for simplicity, we can refer to it as a world. A world can actually encompass many levels, but for simplicity's sake, we'll call it a world because that's sort of the grand collection of stuff in Unreal. So a world is pretty much a collection of actors. And if you come from Unity, an actor is a lot like a game object. It's something that has that is sort of bound to the world. And the thing with actors is that they can't exist without a world. So when we load up our level, when we double click and load up the third person level there, or when we press played, that level is loaded and it creates all these actors that we've placed in the level. So as all these meshes are actors, The playable character is an actor. Everything is an actor. But then we're going to work with hierarchies, code hierarchies, actually, for setting functionality for these actors. But sort of the base type is an actor. And since these actors are all bound to a single world, they can't exist without this world. When we unload this world, when we say go to this level instead, all these actors will be destroyed. So anything we had in that level will be destroyed, because the engine says, well, you don't need this level anymore, so we're gonna just destroy everything. And that's sort of how most game engines work, or at least modern game engines, where you sort of have a type that's bound to a specific scene or a world. So like I said, everything we place in the level, and even the playable character that we were running around with, are both actors. The only sort of defining thing about an actor in Unreal, it has a bunch of inbuilt functionality that's inherited and shared by all types of actors. But the most crucial thing is that they are bound to a world. They might not even have a transform. They might not be actually as such placeable in the level. That we can always drag them out, and they can be in the world outliner, but they might not even have a transform or a position in the world. That's actually a component that sets that, and not, for example, in Unity, a game object always has a transform component. It doesn't in Unreal. When we create a blueprint actor, it always does have a transform component, but that's sort of another thing. But that sort of brings us to components. Components are owned by actors. So an actor is sort of a shell. It has a bunch of functionality that sort of can talk between these components and talk to other actors and stuff like that, functionality. But to not have to implement stuff in several actors, we use components. So like, for example, if I have a car and I want to use a mesh for that car to show the car, we don't want it to be a static mesh, like we can't move it about. We want it to be able to accept input and stuff. So it can't be the same thing as we're dragging a box out into the level, because that's what's called a static mesh actor, and it only has a static mesh component. But we want to use that mesh, the same component, static mesh component, for our car, because we want to show a car. We want to render a car. So instead of having to implement a bunch of stuff in the car actor, we add a component that says, "Hey, you're a reusable component that's used to render a mesh," and we can add a bunch of collection for these. So it's pretty much reusable code that we can sort of modularly build up our actors to get the functionality we want. Any plans for a break? Yeah. I'll go through this, and then we can take a break, and we will we'll continue placing stuff in the level. Yeah, people are not hungry yet. It's not time for lunch yet. Then, so hierarchies. If you're a programmer, you know this already. If not, this is sort of how stuff is created in game engines, and Unreal is very reliant on a hierarchy. So, like I said, all the stuff we placed in the level is an actor. The static mesh actor, those are the boxes we dragged out. We have something called a game mode, which defines the rules of the game. That's an actor. It's bound to that world. The moving platform we'll be creating later on, it's also an actor. And it has a movement component, and it actually has a static mesh component as well. I forgot to put that in. Because the static mesh actor, we wanted to show a mesh, so it has a static mesh component. The moving platform, we wanted to show a mesh and be able to move. So it will have two components. Then we have our pawn, which is sort of a base class for all playable characters, no matter what they are, sort of thing. So it's an actor with a bit of added functionality for accepting input and stuff like that. And a bit of other stuff that I won't go into. So that the car we'll be building, it's a pawn. And the character we're moving about with now in the game, it's also a pawn, but it's a subclass of that pawn. So we take the pawn, we inherit all the properties and the functionality of that pawn, and we say, hey, you're a character now. And we can sort of alter stuff in there as well. Yeah. So we'll take a little break, say another, let's say, how long a break do you want? 10, 15? Yeah, 10 minutes, a 10-minute break. And then we'll talk about materials and the material workflow. If you don't want to take a break, keep placing and building up your level, create something awesome and interesting. Just place stuff. And we'll be back in 10 minutes. And I hope there's coffee in Visual Magic's classroom. Yeah, so material UVs, and uh, let's see if I can get back to the editor. Um, the materials, like this, for example, won't fit. I would want this to tile a bit more. Unfortunately, it sort of has to be set up in the material, or we have to alter the UVs of the mesh. I'm going to go through the material setup. So I'll show you how you actually sort of work with stuff like that if you want to do it in the material and not uh, in the mesh itself. When you're working, for example, stuff like this, you have sort of simple shapes. Let's say you have a wall, for example, and you sort of want to build that as a modular wall. So you have one piece that's 4 by 2 meters, two by 4 meters, 4 meters high and 2 meters wide, and you have one piece that's 4 meters and 4 meters. When you're doing the UVs, you might, to avoid having to have unique textures for each mesh, you might want to work with textile density and get the UVs to sort of fit the texture, so you can have it tiling within the UVs instead of having the UVs in just a 0 to 1 space. But that's a more advanced topic that we won't be handling too much today. But that's sort of a workflow question. We can tile the UVs in we can tile um, the texture in the material. So we're going to do that as well. So 1 minute left, and then we'll get going again, and we'll start on materials. I'm gonna download the course files since I'm not on my own computer. Let's see, where did it go? There we go. Oh, god damn! I didn't know that. You can change the pivot point. Oh, how beautiful! I didn't know that. I actually didn't know that. That's amazing. Middle mouse button and drag the. So to change the pivot point, I didn't know you could do that. That's awesome. If you're in the transform tool and you have this box selected, if you middle mouse click and hold and drag, you can move the pivot point. That's awesome. I didn't know that. That's been sort of an issue for me for such a long time, and one of my griefs with Unreal. I didn't know, and Eddie didn't know either. His company will be so happy. You should charge for that. Send a bill to Flattail Games. No, I won't pay for it. Eddie's company will pay. I wonder how long that's been in the engine. I'm not sure. Yeah, probably forever. And probably undocumented like so much of the engine. Oh, now we're getting now we're getting complex. Multiple. Let's see. Let's say that. Yeah, yeah. That works too. So you can do the same for multiple objects. Yeah. But that was sort of manually placing the. I'm not sure. So if you want the pivot point to be the last one, you can sort of just do that as well. Then we have that. Right. So materials. Let's get to the fun stuff. So, like I mentioned before, you can sort of see in the details panel at the right, we have our material. An FBX can of course have multiple materials. That's all set up in the content creation program of your choice, multiple material layers. Well, I shouldn't say layers because that's a different thing. Multiple materials. And the same thing goes for these BSP brushes. You can see surface material, element 0, and I can just select the material there. But before I do that, since we've been working a bit with BSP brushes now, when I showed you before, I took a material, this ground moss, and I dragged it onto the cube here. So we have a big mossy cube. So I just dragged and dropped it onto the cube. That's an FBX, an imported asset. So it has only one material slot, and that material is applied for the whole mesh. If I do that on a BSP brush, it's actually material per face. So that's a bit annoying if I wanted the whole cube to be mossy cube, because then I have to drag it onto all sides of the cube, and that won't work. So to texture, just drag and drop texture a BSP brush. Select the BSP brush. Then under geometry in the details panel, we have a little drop down that says select. When the very top option is select matching brush, that selects all faces on that brush. And now we can see in the elements we have two materials because it's different materials on different sides. Unfortunately, I can't just drag drop. Yeah, I can. Okay, this is weird. Yeah, apparently you can't drag and drop. So now I've set it for all the faces on that cube, except the Boolean part, because that's actually faces from the other mesh, the Boolean part. So we have to select those, select matching brush, and put that on as well. The hotkey Shift B, which is really handy. Shift B. Select all matching, the matching brush. So for stairs here, it'll be ridiculous to set for every face. So Shift B, mossy stairs. And for meshes, just drag and drop, set it. We can do the same thing if we go into our assets here in the content browser in the bottom. If I always want my doors here to by default be, let's say, burnished steel. I can just set it here, and then for every one I place, if I just drag it out into the level now, it'll be set by default to that burnished steel material, so we don't have to set it in the level, so to speak. So material workflows in Unreal. Unreal has we can talk first about actually creating a material. So I'll keep this nice and tidy. I'll create a folder called materials, and I did that by just right-clicking at the very top, new folder, and call it materials. And then to create a material, right-click again, and we have all this stuff. We have a material here because it's sort of something that we can create quite often, so it's a quick access. But we can also find it under materials and textures and material. And under here, create advanced assets. And these aren't really advanced, but fine. Here we can create all the types of assets that are sort of exposed to the editor. We can create tools for the editor. We can create foliage actor, visual effects using Niagara, media sources, all sorts of stuff. But today we'll work with materials. So I'll just use the quick access, use create material, and I'll call this, to keep with the Unreal naming conventions. They sort of, it doesn't really matter, but you can have your own naming conventions, but I'll keep their standard one. I'll call it capital M underline, I'll call it mine, gray boxing. Do another line, and I call it a master. So the material workflow in Unreal, we sort of create this hierarchy of materials as well. So if I go back to the boring slides again and go to the next page, the material workflow in Unreal sort of works with master materials and material instances. They're not exactly a hierarchical child of the material, but rather an instance with different settings. But this sort of gives us a way to alter materials by parameters and create a lot of different materials from the same shader, so to speak, and set parameters per instance, either as another unique material that we can apply to many different things, or a material that's unique for a specific actor in the world, which is called a dynamic material instance. So this is kind of a setup you might have, a very simplified one. So I have my M underline surface master. It works for all my solid surfaces. So it works for wood, which is called MI, for material instance, wood, and MI stone. And it's actually the same material. We just alter parameters, and parameters can be anything from a float that sets the roughness or the base specular value or something like that, to a texture. It can be a color, it can be a lot of different things. So we can expose those parameters to be changed in the material instances. and we'll do that in just a bit. But there are a few different material domains. So my surface material can't be translucent because it's in the domain for, I think the domain is actually called surface or solid. We'll have a look in a bit. So if I want a glass material, I have to create a new master material for that. That's a translucent material. So I'll create my M glass master material. I'll expose everything I want to be able to change for different types of glass. And then I'll have material instance for like frosted glass and for cracked green glass, for example, for used for a bottle or something. So how does this work though in the engine? So now I have created my material here, gray boxing master. It's still the, we can see on the thumbnail here, it's still the sort of default checker box material. So if I double click it, I get into the material graph, something that Unity finally has gotten for the high quality render pipeline. It's awesome. So this is sort of our first introduction to the node-based system in Unreal as well. Here in the middle, this is sort of our output for our material. So it's a lot like creating materials in Maya or other DCCs, Blender or something. A material graph. So I can just sort of drag stuff into this. And I'm not, I think you have, yeah, it should be default since I installed this yesterday. On the right-hand side, we have a palette. I never use that palette. I can just close it because it's just in the way. You might, if you want to use it, you can. There you can see all the stuff that's available to use in the material editor, and it's a bunch of stuff, and a lot of it's not actually functioning, I think. Instead, I'll just mark this base color, drag from it, and let go, and then it opens the context menu. So for base color, the albedo, I want just a simple color. Okay, so if you closed it, you can go to Window, and there you have Palette, and then it opens. And here's also, if you, when you start working with a bunch of textures and stuff, if you want to drag those into the material, as it is now, I have to go out here. I have to sort of zoom about. I have to go to starter content. Oh, I want a texture. So I want this normal texture here, and I'll drag that in, and there it is. Yeah, that's fine. But just to speed stuff up, you can also add a content browser here in the material editor. So you can go to content browser 2, and I'll just dock that here down in the bottom. So you can, all these windows are draggable. The same goes for our editor out here as well. I can just drag and place stuff wherever I want it. See if I can get this back in place. Yeah, that's fine. It works. Chile. Yeah, I know. I'm shameless. And you can scale these windows as well. So I'll scale this down because we won't be using it much now. So I closed down the context menu, so I'll do it again. From base color, just left click, drag out, and I get the context menu. And I just want a color. And I want this color to be settable for each material instance. For each material instance we create later on. So for materials, a color is a vector. So I'll type vector. And everything that's named something with parameter is something that's exposed. that we can use later on. So I'll choose a vector parameter. And there's a bunch of stuff here. So it can be quite daunting and hard to find your way around because there's so much, and you'll that'll get even worse when we get into Blueprint. The search system is pretty good. So if you sort of know what you want, start typing. The search system in the material graph is actually worse than it's not as good as the Blueprint one. The Blueprint one, you can actually sort of just start typing what you sort of want, and it usually gives a pretty good result. Pretty good suggestion. No, a vector in Unreal is usually vector 3. But in the material graph, the standard vector is 4-dimensional. So there's a bit of, I mean, we're using sort of the same names for things that might be a little bit different. So we sort of have to separate the blueprints from the materials. But since we haven't started working with the blueprints yet, we'll just pass it by like nothing is wrong. So my details panel has moved from the bottom right. It's in the material graph here. It's here in the bottom left instead. So when I've clicked my parameter here, it's just called param now because it's auto-saved. I have at the very top a parameter name. I could have typed that in when I created it as well. I'll call this color with an American spelling. It doesn't really matter, but I'll stick to American spelling. I can set the default value. So I have a color picker. Let's set it to sort of bluish gray. It doesn't really matter. We can alter this per instance later on. Unreal is using a PBR workflow, a PBR metal workflow. So a physically based rendering pipeline. So we can define something as being metallic, and it'll give us properties of visual properties of a metallic object and stuff like that. Roughness is how rough the surface is. Normal is how light is interacting with the surface, so we can sort of fake shapes that aren't actually there. And word position offset, we won't talk about that now, but it's quite handy as well for more advanced stuff. Ambient occlusion, inbuilt shadows, sort of baked shadows. Pixel depth offset, we won't talk about that now either. Again, can be quite handy as well for more advanced stuff. But we'll set up a simple material that we can sort of change how we want it. So we want to be able to change the color. We want to be able to change how rough the surface is. So I'll drag out from that, and I get the same search box, and I'll start typing scalar parameter. It's actually a single float parameter. So I'll call this roughness. And here I have a default value. I'll set that to 0.734 or something like that. I have a minimum value and a maximum value. Roughness can never go beyond 1, never below 0. So I'll set that max slider to 1. Now I actually can get a slider instead of having to type in the values in the instances you'll see later on. We don't have a normal map, so we won't use one for this. We just leave it as it is, empty. Oh, sorry. I'll pick it again right now because metallic will do the same thing. We pull out, we'll type scalar parameter. And I'll change the name to metal. We can also add these scalar parameters. We might not want to connect them straight to this, to the output. We can also right click here, type scalar, just right click anywhere in the graph, right click scalar parameter, and then we have a new scalar parameter, and then we can connect that to whatever we want. That takes a scalar parameter, it has to be the right type. Let's see, is it Control S? No. Oh, I saved stuff. Oh, right. You can also, scalar parameters are quite common when you're doing materials. So there's actually a shortcut as well. If you hold down the left key, left mouse button and press S, you will create a, come on. S and then click. Yeah, that's it. You hold down S and click just anywhere in the graph, you'll create a scalar parameter. So, scale up the text. I'll zoom in a bit. I wonder if I can scale up this text. It would be better. I can move it up at least, so it's easier to see. So as well, here on the left, we have a preview of our material, and we can select a few shapes, so get that preview on, so we can sort of see it on different types of shapes. And at the very far end, we have set preview mesh based on current content browser selection. So I could select, let's see, if I open up my content browser down here, I'll go to starter content, architecture, and I want to use this platform. I can do that as well. And I get the platform and I get the material on that. That preview mesh can also be set at the very bottom here as well in the details panel. You can set a preview mesh. Drop down, let's say we want to set it for our mannequin instead. Console. We'll set it for our chair. And there we have it on our chair. So we have 3 parameters. We have our color, we have the metal value and the roughness value. We'll click apply. That sort of updates the material, and we'll save it as well. And I'll close this down. In the content browser, I go to my materials, and I can just drag this out to my materials. There I have it. So I can use this material how I want it now. But I can't change any. If I want to change something, I have to go into the material. I have to change the hard-coded values, so to speak. So it's going to be a unique material for each. This one is gray. That's the way it is. But if I right-click, select right-click, I can create material instance. And I'll do that. And I'll call this ME gray boxing, and we'll call it blue. And I'll remove that inst at the end. And I'll open that up. I get the same preview mesh. And then I have a details panel on the right, where I have the parameters that I set exposed. So I have my color, I have my metal, and I have my roughness. And down here we can see that the parent of this material is this M gray box master. So if I want to change the color to blue, I'll first activate that I want to change that parameter. I'll click the checkbox and then click the color select, and I'll make this sort of bluish, something like that. So now I have, oh, that's a crappy blue. Let's do it bluer. There we go. Now it's definitely blue. But I also want to be a shiny blue. So I'll also select that I want to edit the roughness. And I'll set that to 0.2. So now we have a shiny blue. It's not as rough. The surface is not as rough. So now we have a sort of shiny blue, a slick blue. I'm not sure if you can. You're upside. You're moving in the wrong direction. If you. So now I have a material instance of this, and for. You lost me with this blue stuff. I'll show it again. So right click on the master material, create a material instance. I could do that on the blue material as well, but we'll do it from the master. We sort of have a little, up in the top left corner, we sort of have a little information about the shader as well, about this this setup, how sort of many instructions and how expensive this, computationally expensive this material is to use. So when we open up the material instance, we have our parameters that we exposed on the right side. Activate the ones you want. I activated color, I changed it in the color picker. I activated roughness and changed the roughness value. So those are the two values I've changed. Let's make it metal as well. A metal chair. Ah, that's awful. There we go. Sort of a blue metal chair. Yeah, so for organizational purposes as well, under my materials folder, I create a subfolder. I'll call it master materials, and I'll put my master materials in there, over there. And now I just dragged and dropped the master material onto the master material folder. Just prep, and it gives me an option: move there, copy there, an advanced copy there. I'm not sure if I've ever used that. Very handy. Moving stuff about in the editor can cause some issues. Also, deleting stuff from the editor can cause some issues, especially when something's referenced by something else. So a good practice, whenever we've moved anything in the editor, on the very top in our hierarchy, we have our content browser. We can right click, and we have this little thing here called fix up redirectors in the folder. Run that after you moved anything. So Unreal sort of uses a text-based, well, it's just do it. It might get the references might not be updated correctly otherwise. It's just easier to work with if we don't have to run into problems with redirectors. Just do it. Yeah, just do it as soon as you move something. So now we have a material instance. Yeah, all right. The reason why we are using material instances instead of creating a material for each unique material we want, One is pure performance, a pure performance perspective. It's way more performant to use instances. So it's not uncommon to, if you've been into Unreal, for example, and used Megascans assets, Quixel assets, when you import them, you get automatically created a master material, and then all other materials you import are instances of that material with different textures. It's a pure performance gain, way easier, way better to work with, and also it's easier to sort of alter and tweak materials when you just have a few of them. You know what's supposed to be exposed and edited by designers, and well, designers probably made the material as well. The tech artist made the material, but you can sort of tweak the material. So it's cheaper, computationally speaking, and memory wise. Otherwise, you'll probably soon run out of video memory. Not for materials like this. This is really cheap but when you're working with textures. So I had something more to say about that. We'll take a few questions on the material workflow for now, and then I'll just, there we go. Viewport, invert middle mouse pan. Oh, you can't have it. It is the correct way already. I don't know what you're talking about. So, questions about the material setup, and then I'll show you how to work with the textures and importing assets. And then we're sort of about done for today. And I hope that information, I think it was sent along as well. So we'll break for lunch at 12, and the actual course ends at 12. But if you want to talk more or have other discussions or more questions and stuff, I'll still be around and here after lunch. So from 1 at least till 3. So we can just get tips, and I'll teach you some other stuff. But it's not sort of part of the course as such, and not structured as the course. But we can talk about all things Unreal pretty much. Yeah, there's not this specific material, but in the project, if you want to download materials, you can download the project, and there's materials in there. And there I'll set up a few instances with different properties and use them on the gray boxing I've done there. And it pretty much has the setup of one master for solid materials and one master for transparent materials. We can have a look at that as well. If I go into the master material, we get a bit more advanced in master materials. Here on the right side, when I have the material output selected or nothing selected, we have our material domain. It's not right now, it's set to surface. We have like deferred decal, lighting function, volume, post-process material, used for user interface or virtual texturing. And then we have a blend mode. That's where we set something to translucent, for example. So it's right now an opaque material. We can have a masked with mask transparency, so it can even be 1 or 0. We can mask stuff out, have it totally transparent. Translucent has some translucency. Additive and modulate, and all this stuff is used mostly for effects. Shading model, default lit, accepts lighting. We can have an unlit material. We can have all these with a subsurface scattering. Pre-integrated skin is used for this whole virtual human stuff. Clear coat gives us a clear coat surface on the material. We can have different normals as well, and 2 double normals. Subsurface profile is a more advanced version of subsurface. 2-sided foliage is used mostly for foliage. Hair, same thing, used mostly for hair. Cloth used for cloth. Eye used for eyes. Well, a single water layer is a new thing. I haven't actually touched it yet. It's coming in 4.26, the water system they're introducing to Unreal, which looks really awesome. Thin translucent, I haven't actually worked with. I'm not sure what it is, and stuff like that. So it has a bunch of options as well. So just working with materials is a completely different course just in itself, and you can do a lot of with materials in the material graph. Not as such. You can't really lower the material. I mean, right now we have a pretty much as simple as the materials go. Just a color and a few parameters. I think the live update. So this is sort of the thing as well with working with the instances and the material graph. See, if I change the color in the material instance, I changed over to the material instance. It's way faster, because what it does, when you edit anything in the material graph, it actually recompiles the shader code. So that's why it takes a little bit longer to update something in the material graph opposed to in a material instance. You can build your own shaders. You can add shaders to Unreal. And there's also, if you right click, well, I think that it should be custom. So I think there's a node where you can actually type in HLSL. HLSL. Huh. I thought there was. Maybe it's a plugin thing. Might be a plugin thing. No, not ELSL. It uses HLSL. But sort of similar. Yeah, exactly. What's the difference? It's just 2 different shaded languages, very similar though. I mean, you can write your own shader code. You can create compute shaders and stuff like that. It's a bit intricate and not perhaps as easy as it is in Unity, for example, but it's doable, and I've done it, but it takes a bit more time. And yeah, you can add your own components. So I'll talk about that as well before we move on. You can either create, so if you have functionality that when you start making more advanced materials, you can make sort of subgraphs, which are like components. It's called a material function. So we'll do a new folder called material functions. I'll go into that, and I'll right click, and then under create advanced assets, we have materials and textures. We'll have this node, this asset called a material function. We'll add that, and I'll call it MF unpack normals, for example. So, for example, if you wanted to pack, and I'll show that in a little bit, pack normals maps into 2 channels instead of 3. We'll do, it's a little bit different to set up. So we'll start typing parameter. Input, function input. So then we get a function input. It's sort of just a function input. We can give it a name. I'll call this red channel. And for the function and for the input type, I'll set it to a scalar. To duplicate any node or anything in Unreal, it's Control W. So now I have this selected. Control W. I get another one. It gets a unique name, red channel 1, but I want this to be called green channel. And then I can sort of build out my my graph from this. Let's see if I can remember how to do this. Saturate and square root, I think. And for a normal map, we want a vector output, for example. So I'll do pull off this, and I'll do append, and I'll build a new vector. And I'll append the green channel. So now I had the red channel first, the green channel. I'll do append again, append vector, and I'll add that and plug that in. I hope that was right. I'm not sure. I'm not going to use it. so let's hope that was right. So a tiny thing here, though. When you've created a material function, it's a bit annoying. You have to make sure you can see the details for the material function. And there's a checkbox there that has exposed to library. If we haven't done that, we can't find it in our material graph. Very annoying, and I have no idea why they still have that. So if I go into my material, I can right click and I'll call mine MF unpack normal, and I get that material function. So now I created a reusable part of a shader. So then I just take my green channel and my red channel and green channel from a texture and create a normal map from that, a 3 channel from that. Right. So textures and FBXs and stuff like that. I was supposed to download stuff. I got distracted. I wonder where that is. Yeah. No, no. Downloads. So if you visit the site I posted earlier, under, I can show you in my Google Drive here. It should look the same. You should end up here. And under assets, we have an FBX, it's a model, and a folder of textures, one of raw textures and one of channel pack textures. So I need to download those because I haven't done that yet. So if you want to, I had some questions earlier about Megascans and Quixel as well. So I'll talk a bit about that after lunch if you want to hang around, and we'll have a look at how we can use Quixel assets, because then we can sort of build something really good looking really fast. So for people who don't know, Quixel is a library of scanned real world assets, real world objects and materials and stuff like that. So Epic actually bought them. It's a Swedish company. I actually bought them. Let's see. This download is really slow. And they're now offering with the use, if you use Unreal Engine, the entire library is free to use, and it's a lot of stuff, and they're all set up to, when you import them to Unreal, you get them the materials set up more or less correctly. You can tweak that. And you get all the meshes have level of detail settings and stuff like that, so they won't get too heavy, and everything is sort of set up, so you just have to place them in the level, and it's really awesome. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be modeling on your own, but still, it's easy to use for, especially for scene dressing. Yeah. Yeah, it should be part of the recording, I hope. I mean, we'll use the same, I'll just leave the meeting running, and the recording will probably be the same recording. So, since my download is taking forever, it seems, I'll talk a bit about what we have in the level apart from all these cubes and stuff. Right here in the middle, we can see a bit of a sun icon. So lighting is, of course, very important to get right in the scene, and I think for me, it's one of the trickier parts. We have a light source. This is a global light source. That's why it's sort of a sun. We can add one of those from the lighting menu here on the left. We have a directional light, and it's pretty much just it's supposed to replicate sunlight. So it doesn't actually care about the position. We can place it anywhere in the level. The only thing it cares about is the rotation. So if we rotate it, we get a different sun angle. So we can sort of rotate this around and get the shadows moving about. And if you've probably seen, well, you place stuff out in the level, you have this in the top left corner, lighting needs to be rebuilt, a bunch of objects. And if I look at my shadows here as well, if you can see this, it says preview. That's because Unreal uses something called light maps. It's a pure performance thing as well. If we would have enabled ray tracing, we could do global illumination with ray tracing. And if we want really, really high quality renders, we want to use that. But we can actually bake lighting in from the scene, lighting that won't change, static lighting and stationary lighting. We can bake that into textures and apply that to all the meshes in the scene. So that's what a light map is. And as soon as we've moved something about, we sort of have to rebake this. And it might take a long time when you have a lot of stuff and a lot of lights in the scene. So don't do it every time that shows up, but make sure to do it before you publish anything or before you make a final render or something. So we have our build menu here up at the top. And under build, we can either press the drop down and say build lighting only, and then only build the light, or we can just press the build button because we don't have that much else that needs to be built. We don't. I mean, the other things it builds reflection captures, and it builds navigation and stuff, and that's usually really fast compared to the lighting. So I'll just press build, and it'll start streaming stuff, and it wants to allow internet access as well. And I get this message log. I'll put that down here. So it'll work a while, and then it said, hey, my lighting build is complete. It's pretty fast now that we don't have that much in the level, and it updates the textures, and no longer says preview, and it's placed all the shadows where they should be and stuff like that. So when we import assets into Unreal, we should create our own light map UVs as well. Let's just download the FBX. So light map UVs are a bit different from other UVs. If you worked in the DCC tool, I'll show you how to import a mesh as well before I show you light map UVs. They're not supposed to be they can't be overlapping, and they're usually really low resolution. Yeah, I should probably make it into a compressed folder already, because I started compressing it and it's really slow. It's better to download them one by one, I think. My bad. Yeah, they can't be overlapping, and it's light map texture is usually like 64 by 64 or 128 by 28 128. You want sort of a low resolution, so you have to have spacing between UV islands and stuff like that to avoid bleeding between UV islands. But importing a mesh. So where did that go? No, wrong folder. There we go. I have my trusty asset browser up here. What happened? And importing an FBX into Unreal is as easy as dragging and dropping. So I have this FBX here, and I'll just drag it into the content browser, and I get this import stuff. We want to already generate collisions because we haven't set up any collisions in our DCC tool. We can do that as well. And we'll just leave everything as default. It says it's made in Blender and a Y up axis and stuff like that, and it'll import it and turn it the right way up. So I'll select import all. That doesn't matter now that I only imported one mesh. It doesn't matter if I press import or import all. If you can just select multiple meshes and drag them in all at once, and then you can import all with the same settings, or you can set the settings per import. So I have this sort of entrance stuff with the horrible UVs, but we won't spend too much time looking at these UVs, because this is the UVs I should be had laid out for the texturing, but I ran out of time. But up here in the menu for my asset here, I have a UV map, a UV selection. Oh, I forgot to uncheck something. When I imported the asset, it also gave me an option to generate light map UVs. Then it'll already generate light map UVs. That works sometimes. And it's pretty good, actually. It's not horribly bad, but it's better to make them yourself. But so in my UV channel 2, I created light map UVs. And they're pretty much, you want to use as much space of the 001 to get as much texel room as possible in the 0 to 1 space. And you want to separate your islands. And you want to also, if you think about how light works, if you have light shining from the left and it's connected to a corner, and you have the opposite side, you sort of want a cut there, because otherwise, since the texture is so low resolution, the shadow will actually bleed around the corner. So any corners and stuff, sharp edges, you want cut in your UVs and different islands. But that's a totally different story. Setting up light map UVs is also a different story. But we imported a mesh. Just dragged and dropped it. Same thing as all the other meshes. We just drag and place it in a level. We can turn this around. Sort of have it here. We can apply our material to it. Master material. We'll make it pinkish. And there we have it. And working with textures, I'll try to, I'll just do the channel packed ones because we're running out of time. I'll download those as well. One by one, apparently. I'll post the files in a zipped project as well, so you can have them there. So I've downloaded 3 textures and we'll just do this messy and just import them into the base of the project. Same thing, drag drop. Unreal will actually, if you have a pure normal texture, for example, it'll actually detect that it's a normal and set compression settings and stuff like that, depending on the type of texture it is, and it's usually quite right, but you can alter those as well. We can have a look at our textures. Can change stuff around in textures as well, and settings for the textures. So we want to use this in a material. So we set up a material. I'll just give it a dummy name. I'll open that up. Same thing, drag drop, put it in. Now, if this was a master material, let's say it is a master material, I want to be able to scale it. So I'll add a UV chord, text chord, sorry, text chord, texture coordinate. I'll pull off that and I'll do a multiply. This is sort of our scalar. Now we'll just scale in uniformly in both directions, just for ease of access. But pull off the B and add a scalar. This is our scaling parameter. Oh, sorry. Scale. And we'll set it default to 1 because we don't want any scaling by default. Plug that into all the UV inputs of our textures. We want to expose these textures to a material instance. So we'll right click on the texture sample node. We'll say convert to parameter, and we'll convert it to a parameter. We need to give it a name. And the name is, I'll explain that in just a bit. So when working in a real-time engine, we need to consider both performance for the GPU and CPU, and also memory usage, since we need to be able to render everything in a few milliseconds. And memory usage is a big part when working with the materials. The node below the text chord is the scale node, a scalar node, an input parameter for setting the scale. So it's an exposed parameter for setting the scale. Yeah, so working with textures. We want to get as much information out of our textures as possible without, so we, instead of using a single texture for roughness, a single like 4K texture for roughness, and a single 4K texture for the metal map, and a single 4K texture for the normal map, we can do something called channel packing, where we actually take the roughness map, which is a black and white map. We pack that into the red channel here, for example. This texture I called RMDAO. This should be a small o, actually. So it sort of tells me that my red channel is my roughness. So I'll plug that into the roughness. And the green channel, I'm not sure where you can see this. This should be, I'll have to ask Therese, but we'll get that information out. The green channel is our metal map. The blue channel is our displacement. We won't use that now. And our alpha channel is our ambient occlusion. So we actually have sort of 4 textures in one. The albedo needs all 3 channels at least, so we'll just use that as a single used RGB. Here, the reason I made that material function earlier, I've packed a normal map into 2 channels instead of the normal 3. So a red channel and green channel, and plug that into the normal. And then I have actually a translucency and what's called a fuzzy shading map as well. But we won't be using those either. So now I have my texture material here. So this could be probably more be our base surface material with a few more setups as well, probably. Close that down. I think the normals are incorrect, but I'll mess that material function up. We'll create a material instance of that. And we'll just use the default name. Maybe they're messed up. And now we can just set the textures as parameters as well. So we can use different textures, still use the same material, just change the textures. And then we can scale our material as well. So we can just tile it multiple times, as many times as we want. And then we can probably have some smart stuff set up so we can hide tiling as well in the material. Right. So I probably missed a lot. Like I said earlier, it would be fun if you spent some time this week building up a scene, working with importing assets and creating materials and stuff, and building a scene. You can, if you'd like, you can send me screenshots of the levels you've created, and it would be fun just to see. There's my I sent that to Simon. It wasn't supposed, that was a direct message. There we go. You can email me those a few screenshots if you like. Email me and ask me questions if you'd like. Otherwise, hopefully next week we'll get going with more blueprint stuff and some dynamics. And after lunch, I'll show, voluntary after lunch, I'll show working with Quixel and stuff like that. And I can just answer a whole bunch of questions. We can break for lunch, but I'll stay, let's say 10 more minutes if there's questions. And I'll make sure Therese mails out as well where you can find the recording of this session. The dates are supposed to be every Friday, the same from 9 till 12, same as this one, for 3 weeks, I think. Yeah. So we got a bit tight at the end, so might have gone a bit fast forward there, but hopefully you got a little bit of information at least out of it. Thank you. Oh, that's horrible. So much tiling. So now I can sort of just in my material instance as well, sort of see the live updates in the scene. The UVs are horrible and the texturing is horrible, but I can easily just update and see stuff. It's way faster than actually editing a material. So, yeah. When you press, when you can't walk through my entrance. So since it generated the collisions for us, I would guess if I enter this, open up the static mesh, I can go to collisions, show simple collisions. You can see here that it's just using a single box as collisions. We can set up these collisions in the editor as well. And this is probably why you want to make your collisions in a 3D program instead. And it's sort of a convention. I think they support most 3D applications these days, and you usually just have to create an additional mesh, name it UCX, UCX underline, and the same as the mesh it's going to be the collision for. So then you can sort of set up a boxy collision by yourself. What we could do, let's see here, primitives, convex elements, simple collision presets. Oh yes, collision complexity, because that use complex collision as simple. It'll work quite fine for this, at least for now. Then you could actually walk through it. It'll use the complex shape of the mesh instead of a simplified box collision. So if there are no more questions, I'll break for lunch and I'll be back at 1 to answer more questions and show you a bit of how we use Quixel as well. Thank you.